Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Rachel Burden and Charlie State.
Here are our headlines today. A warning that the new UK variant of coronavirus may be more deadly than first thought, as the Prime Minister says infection rates are still worryingly high.
Doctors' leaders call for changes in the vaccine rollout. They want the 12-week gap between the first and second Pfizer doses to be halved.
Tighter border restrictions could be on the way, including hotel quarantines for those entering the UK.
Good morning. The FA Cup fairy tale journey is over for Chorley, but it took a Wolves wonder goal to beat them. And the part-timers were left thinking what might have been as they came so close.
What will we do with a drunken sailor? What will we do with a drunken sailor? What will we do with a drunken sailor?
We meet the sea shanty star who's just landed a record deal, giving up his job as a postman.
Well, we've had snow showers here and there across the country over the last couple of days. There's an increasing chance of heavier snow across the southern half of the UK over the weekend. Find out in the forecast.
Good morning, it's Saturday the 23rd of January. Our top story today, the Prime Minister has warned that a new UK variant of coronavirus, the one we have been talking about recently, may be more deadly than first thought.
He stressed that more research needed to be done and it's thought the vaccines will still work.
It comes after a record number of vaccines were given in the latest 24-hour period. More than 400,000 people got their first dose. But senior doctors have called for a shorter gap between the first and second doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
The British Medical Association wants that halved to 6 weeks, saying the policy was difficult to justify. Dan Johnson has this report.
There's a new tone to the government's message. Not just follow the rules, but asking us all to acknowledge the pressure on hospitals and question our movements, our level of interaction.
Look them in the eyes and tell them you're doing all you can to stop the spread of COVID-19.
Transmission rates have been fueled by the new variant of coronavirus, and now there are early signs it could also be more deadly. It's early days, it's limited research, more analysis is needed to be certain, but that hasn't stopped scientists getting concerned.
I think the evidence is now reasonably strong, but only based on this one data set. But we are definitely struggling with this this new variant, whether it's more lethal or not.
That struggle is underlined by the latest government figures, showing there were 40,261 new infections recorded in the last 24-hour period. There were more than 38,500 people in hospital with coronavirus in the 7 days to this Wednesday. And another 1,401 people have died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. Vaccines are still expected to be effective. More than 5.3 million first doses have been given now, but there are calls to speed that up. Doctors are questioning the decision to spread vaccine doses 12 weeks apart. The British Medical Association's called for that to be cut to 6 weeks, saying the UK's alone in allowing that much of a delay. It's also concerned about unpredictable vaccine supplies.
Most nations in the world are facing similar challenges to the UK in having limited vaccine supplies and also wanting to protect their population maximally. No other nation has adopted the UK's approach. We think that the flexibility that the World Health Organization offers to 42 days is being stretched far too much to go from 6 weeks right through to 12 weeks.
And pictures like this from Heathrow Airport have added pressure for firmer measures at our borders, especially with other variants emerging around the world. On Monday, ministers will discuss the possibility of enforced quarantine on arrival in designated hotels. But the key message to most of us remains the same.
Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Dan Johnson, BBC News.
Let's speak to our political correspondent, Helen Catt then. Helen, it does seem this issue about potential new travel restrictions is the next big political decision that they'll have to take there in Westminster.
Yes, it is. I mean, you heard there some of the concerns about the variant of the virus that developed here in the UK, in Kent, but of course it isn't the only place where there have been variants which have popped up. They've also developed in South Africa, in Brazil, for example. So there is a focus on, well, how do you make sure that you don't import those new strains into the UK? And also that photograph that we saw there of those queues at Heathrow, that has also put the focus on what's happening at the borders too. Labour's saying that ministers need to ensure better control. Now, as it stands, anybody arriving into the UK from anywhere except Ireland, the Isle of Man or the Channel Islands already has to quarantine for 10 days and they have to prove they've had a negative COVID test. But on Monday, ministers are going to meet to look at going further, potentially that idea of making people quarantine in designated hotels. Now, one government source says that that is likely to be adopted, although no final decision has been made. And if such policy was to be introduced, well, then there would be some exemptions to it, for example, for lorry drivers who are driving freight across the Channel. But it is likely that is likely to be adopted. And of course, worth remembering that the current situation is under the current guidance that travel should only be happening if it is absolutely necessary.
Thank you very much, Helen.
The Royal College of Nursing is calling for all staff in the UK to be given higher grade face masks to protect them against new variants of coronavirus. College has written to the government and the Health and Safety Executive warning that the lives of nurses could be at risk if they're given inadequate personal protective equipment. The Department of Health says it's looked at the evidence and found no reason to change existing recommendations.
Today marks exactly 1 year since the Chinese city of Wuhan became the first place to go into lockdown. The first cases of the virus were detected at a local food market. Transport links with the outside world were cut and the population of 11 million were confined to their homes for 76 days. Life in Wuhan is now largely back to normal.
A nighttime curfew will come into force in the Netherlands in a bid to curb coronavirus infection rates in the country. People will be asked to stay at home from 9 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. with fines for anyone found outdoors without a valid reason. Flights have also been banned from high-risk areas to limit the spread of new coronavirus variants.
Democratic leaders in the US Congress have said the articles of impeachment against former President Donald Trump will be delivered to the Senate on Monday. The full trial itself, though, will not begin until next month. The House of Representatives impeached Mr. Trump for incitement of insurrection last week after the Capitol building was stormed by his supporters.
Two rail routes which were closed more than 50 years ago are to be reopened with a new investment package worth almost £600 million. East-West Rail will eventually connect Oxford and Cambridge, and then the Northumberland line is aiming to reintroduce passenger services. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the ambition is to stimulate the economy and connect communities.
And it's, what's the time now? Coming up to 8 minutes past 8. Now, one group of people who may have been feeling particularly concerned during the pandemic is pregnant women.
Now, the husband of a nurse who died with coronavirus after her baby was delivered is calling for better protection for pregnant workers.
Mary Ajipong died shortly after giving birth by emergency caesarean last April. John Ironmonger has been speaking to her husband, Ernest.
Early in the morning, going to work, look at this one.
She had this unique personality that you would just fall in love with her. I strongly believe, Mary shouldn't have died.
Mary worked late into her pregnancy at Luton and Dunstable Hospital. In April last year, she fell critically ill with COVID-19. Her baby was delivered just days before she died.
It's been 9 months since you lost Mary, and since you've had a new person to look after, little Mary. How have you been coping with that huge change in your life?
It's been really tough, and it's not just dealing with the loss, having just a few days old baby, on your own as a parent, having to also deal with a 2-year-old son who keeps asking you, where's my mom? Sometimes, even when I pick him from school, he tells me, Daddy, I want to go home. And I'll ask him, where is home? And he'll tell you where mommy is.
There is mounting clinical evidence that pregnant women with COVID-19 may be more likely to need intensive care and to have their babies prematurely.
She's a blessing and all smiley, like her mom. It's all emotional when I'm asked to talk about her. because Mary was so expecting a daughter. She really, really wanted a daughter.
Since the start of the pandemic, the advice for working pregnant women has been simply to take more precautions at 28 weeks, and Mary's widowers petitioning the government to do more.
I watched the news and the women in ICUs are all pregnant women. And it brings back memory, it brings back pain. I don't think any other family has to go through this. I need to speak up and I need to stand for them.
I'm presenting this petition in memory of Mary Agyapong.
A stand that was taken up last week by Ernest's local MP.
The petition calls on the government to protect pregnant women by ensuring that they can either work from home or that they must be suspended from work on full pay during this pandemic.
I think the government have been slow in a number of areas, but particularly in the area of pregnant women and protecting pregnant women. Of course, at the beginning of this, we didn't know the impact on certain groups, but more and more evidence shows that pregnant women need to be protected sooner.
The Health Secretary said he will take clinical advice on changing shielding guidelines. If nothing else, it could reassure expectant mums and the families who rely on them. John Ironmonger, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.